Mike McCarthy is with us. Good morning to you, Mike. How are you doing?
Morning, lads. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. So we've just seen a big shock there. The first one of the tournament where Uruguay have managed to beat Fiji. I mean, I don't know if you got to see too much of this game, but it was end-to-end stuff, and Uruguay were like, it wasn't a 9-6. It finishes 30-27 in the end. So fairly stunning victory for them.
Yeah, that's an incredible result, and you know, there's always an upset at the World Cup, and we were waiting to see where it was going to happen. Obviously, with South Africa in 2015, that really is an incredible result after Fiji. They were leading against Australia at half-time, put in a phenomenal performance against them. So, you know, that really is an upset, and it's great for the World Cup. Great to see Uruguay get that win.
Well, one of the papers today is making the point that Ireland just need now not to be complacent for the rest of the group, and it's true. Like, you can see how everybody exhaled after the Scotland game, and the performance is so good. And, you know, traditionally, we haven't always backed up our best performances. Under Joe Schmidt, it's been a bit better, but certainly previously, you know, we put in a great performance like that, and everybody's like, oh yeah, it's grand, we've got this now. Only to squeak out a win the next time, or to suffer a defeat. So how do they guard against complacency? What's the best way of doing that from the preparation for this game for the rest of the group stages?
Well, I think in the past, before Joe Schmidt was in charge, Ireland were at their best when they were underdogs. Their backs were against the wall. And what we've seen with this Irish side under Joe Schmidt is that he, there is no complacency. He makes sure lads back up results after results. We've obviously had that dip of the World Cup games, the Six Nations, and for me, that Scotland game was just great to see. Back to business as usual. The team of, just looked like the team of 2018 and everything we were doing. That first half against Scotland was phenomenal. CJ Stander getting man of the match, back to carrying really hard, drawing in defenders. That first, one of his first carries where he drew in those three defenders and, created that separation in defence for Ian Henderson to run a really good line. He makes a big line break. Johnny Sexton, really cool, calm and collected with that kick chase where he does the dummy and kicks to touch. And, really clever maul try after about 15 minutes where you can see the research the lads have been doing. They know Scotland defend with, they mark the middle and the back and leave the front open and then just pile in and force the lads towards the touchline. And you saw Ireland winning the ball at the front and then, sandbagging the front so they can't get forced towards touch. So, those really clever plays that were maybe held back for the warm-up games, really coming in to be used for the World Cup as we expected. And, after some of the World Cup games, I think Joe was talking about, I think the word was periodisation, looking to peak, getting towards a quarter-final. And, probably people during the World Cup games, especially after that England game when that word was mentioned, probably saw it as a bit of a cop-out. But, in all honesty, Joe really does know what he's doing. And I fully believe the way they've been training is to have peaked, not in the warm-up games, but to be peaking right now. And Scotland are a really good side, and we saw how dangerous they are against England in that second half, where they scored all those points to bring it back to a draw. So an incredible first half, and then the bench to come on in the second half and see the game out. It was brilliant to see, and just important the lads kick on now in the second game. And as you said, there'll probably be a lot of changes. One of the things that really interested me there, listening to David Kilcoyne, was him mentioning a load of Japanese players by name. And I think before, if it wasn't a Joe Schmidt team, I'd say most of the lads wouldn't have a clue of a number of the Japanese players. So that just shows to me the detail they go into, looking at this Japanese side, all the players, looking at the individuals, spending hours doing analysis. So that says to me they're in a really good place, and they're putting a lot of time and emphasis and respect into looking at this Japanese side.
It's funny you're talking about making a lot of changes. We had Ron O'Gara on a little bit earlier on, and he was making the case for not making too many changes for this game. Rob Kearney's in the papers today making the point that for Japan, this is effectively a World Cup final for them. Now, maybe the Scotland game is actually a World Cup final for them because that's the one that dictates whether or not they're going to make it out of the pool. Notwithstanding that, like, we saw what they did, as you already talked about, against South Africa 4 years ago. So you have to take it very seriously. Do you take it seriously by playing your full team again, or do you take it seriously by making everybody feel like there's a chance for them to play their way into the team by making a lot of changes? I can't decide which I would be going for if I was in Joe Schmidt's shoes.
Yeah, I think Joe will be looking for consistency. He'll realise the challenge of Japan at the home nation. They're really going to raise their game, as I think Rob Kearney said, it's going to be their World Cup final. We're fully aware of what happened in 2015 with them being South Africa. So I think Joe will go reasonably strong. I think there'll be a few changes, mainly in the back row, with the likes of Reece Ruddock coming in and Jack Conan at number 8, maybe Niall Scannell at hooker. Rob Kearney's back fit, Keith Earl's back fit training, so that they'll come in, I imagine. So I don't think it's going to be complete wholesale changes, but there will be, I think, 5 or 6 key changes, and I can see the lads going well for 40, 50, 60 minutes, and then pulling all those that front 5 off of like Cian Healy, Ty, Ian Henson, James Ryan, and giving them a bit of rest, and probably going a bit. Mixing the team up a bit more for the week after, and giving guys a bit more of a rest after this game.
So you'd start effectively the front row that started the last day, the front 5 that started the last day, a few changes in the back row. Would you start Johnny Sexton?
I wouldn't start him, no. I mean, if there's any kind of doubt and he's got a niggle with that bang to the thigh, obviously he wasn't taking the kicks against Scotland, and I don't think he's taken a full part in training. So, and Joey Carberry fit in training, so we've seen he hit the ground running in that Italy game. He was phenomenal, and he won't have any problem with match fitness. He'll be straight in, I imagine, and can do a really good job. And Jack Carty's been phenomenal. I mean, he hasn't been in the setup for that long. I think the Six Nations last season, so and he'll back up. And Richie Murphy, one of the coaches, has been talking about how those guys can do a really, really good job, and they know they've got full trust in those guys. Yeah,
well, if you were to start Joey Carberry in this game, it is a massive game. It's you're playing the hosts in a World Cup. There aren't that many bigger group games. Obviously, against a Tier 1 nation who is a host nation will be bigger, but there's not a whole heap of them that are going to be absolutely that much bigger. So it would give a lot of confidence if Carberry was to start. And then do you keep Bundy Aki, or do you put Chris Farrell in automatically now as a starter, given the quality of his performance, and leave Bundy in reserve and say, look, it's okay, you got a bit of a knock, we know you're crowned, but we'll get you back the next game?
Yeah, well, obviously Bundy and Pete are going through the return to play protocols. I think it's a 6-day turnaround, so I'm guessing I think
they're actually fine. Yesterday the news came through that they passed the 3rd HIA, so they don't actually need to go through the return to play protocol, so they're actually fine.
Am I wrong? Again, sorry. I normally get it wrong.
Yeah, no, maybe you're right. You know a bit more about this than I do.
No. Again, I normally get it wrong, but I'm guessing if there's any doubt, they've obviously passed. But why risk them? Bundy and Pete, I wouldn't say they would be risked. Chris Farrell played absolutely incredible. But if Bundy Aki's not playing, we know what we missed from him. His defence against Scotland, he really brought that line speed, which was maybe missing in those warm-up games. But yeah, Chris Farrell had a great game in defence and attack, so I imagine they'll stick with Chris Farrell and Gary Ringrose. I don't think Bundy and Pete would be risk, even though if they've passed the protocol. Maybe if it was a quarter-final, they obviously would be, but I don't think at this stage they will be. And if Rob Kearney is fit, does he go straight back in the team? Yeah, I think so, and the pressure's on him, and the pressure's on Keith Earls. Andrew Conway had a phenomenal game. Jordan Lama had a phenomenal game. So, these guys, especially Keith Earls, he didn't play apart from the last game in the warm-ups against Wales. He hasn't had much game time. We all know what he can do. We all know he's an incredible player, but he needs some minutes on the clock at this stage. So, it's a great place for Joe to be in terms of he's got two lads who are kind of behind Rob and Keith Earls in the pecking order. They've performed incredibly well, and Rob and Earls will be feeling the pressure, and no better way to come into a big game against Japan, the host nation, and know they have to perform if they want to be playing going forward in probably in that quarter final. Yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot of criticism in the English papers this morning of the English head coach in particular for picking Billy Vunipola for England against the USA. There's a sense that Eddie Jones is playing with fire a little bit here, in that they're going to win that game. They don't really need to play him. On the other side, the point you're making about periodisation, they're obviously doing exactly the same thing. They want Billy Vunipola to be sharp for the big matches later on. So how do you balance this? Because if he gets injured, England are a completely different team. Yeah, it's risk reward. Every player is different. Like we mentioned, Joey Carberry there, and same with Johnny Sexton. They're guys who can be out for a long period of time, come back in and hit the ground running and perform, incredibly well and steer the ship. There's other players. For myself, I know that I needed 5-6 games to be at my best, and maybe that's the same for Billy Vunipola. I mean, he is such a weapon for that English side, and for England, if they can keep the likes of those big kind of 5 or 6 fit, Mako Itoje, Billy Vunipola, Tuolangi in the centres, Farrell, they have to be in with a shout. But it is a big risk playing him, because we mentioned what an impact he has for that team, and without him, he probably makes that England team, I'd say, 20 or 30% weaker. So I can't imagine he'll play long in that game, but every coach has their plan of how they want to get their players hitting their best form at the right time. And obviously Eddie Jones feels Billy Vunipola needs a little bit more game time. I'm sure he'll be rested at the next game.
Yeah, so far we've obviously got our first glimpse at every of the main contenders. New Zealand clearly are the best team in the World Cup at this stage. That doesn't mean they're unbeatable, but who else has impressed you so far? Now that we've seen it, if you were to power rank who's going to win it at this point, what are your top 4 or 5?
Yeah, I think that New Zealand-South Africa game was, South Africa were completely dominated them for the first 20 minutes. And then, just New Zealand can just turn the screw. And for me, New Zealand won that game, and I don't think they played particularly well for New Zealand. So that's a big concern for me. South Africa, we know, they'll only get better from here. So those two, obviously the big two, and it's looking likely the way things have panned out now with us beating Scotland, it's likely we'll play South Africa, I think, in the quarter-final. And what an insight Felix Jones can give that South African team, which in terms of tactical plays, the way Ireland would approach playing a bigger, more physical side such as South Africa. So that really is a trump card for South Africa to have Felix Jones within the environment should they meet in the quarter-final. But Ireland, on the basis of that performance against Scotland, they're back to the team of 2018. They'll be giving everyone a lot of concern and worry. As I said, they just played so well in that game, and it was great to see. But and as I said, England as well, if they can keep those 5 or 6 key guys fit, I know they're a bit slow against Tonga, but they're only going to improve. And as Eddie Jones said, the World Cup, he's been to a number of World Cups, obviously with Japan, Australia, and assistance coach with South Africa when they won in 2007. He has the experience of knowing how a World Cup works, and he counteracted some of the journalists' comments by saying, you don't have to hit the ground running. It's about peaking at the right time. So, they've all got their formulas, but I'd say those 4 or 5 teams, that's where they currently sit.
Yeah, good stuff, Mike. Thanks for joining us this morning. Cheers, man.
Arigato. Thanks for having me, guys. Cheers.
It's Mike McCarthy with a little bit of Japanese.